Fans, lots of different kinds of fans here. Most of these have been liberated from an obsolete computer tower, where you can find one over the processor and usually one or two more in the power supply or in the case. If you can't find a computer tower, you can find them in some other dead tech. Just make sure when you take them out, you leave the cables attached. Now all of these, and for what we're doing today, these ones are rated at 12 volts. You can see on the label DC 12 and a little V. Although we're going to be using them with rechargeable 9-volt batteries, which seems to work fine. So you're going to need a good rechargeable 9-volt and a good charger.
You will need a 12-volt fan, a 9-volt battery, rechargeable. A holder for that is very useful. Some crocodile leads, a small piece of thin wire or nylon cord, a small, strong crocodile clip, some masking tape, some wire strippers or cutters or scissors, and some acoustic objects. A switch is useful. You can improvise some of this stuff if you don't have it.
The first thing we need to do is probably give it a good wash, because as you can see, it is completely covered in dust, which is made up out of the skin cells of 1990s office workers. Let's give it a scrub down and then we'll get started. Look at all that scum coming off. On the back of this one, next to the voltage, it says 0.18 amps. So it's probably not that powerful, which is quite good. This one here, with a picture of fingers getting chopped off, says 0.5. So none of them are actually going to chop your fingers off, but that one might sting a bit more. Just don't put your fingers in, it'll be fine. And if you're worried about it, just do something else. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is cut off this connector. What I tend to do is cut one cable slightly shorter than the other. So I'm going to cut the positive one, like this here right at the end. Oops, there go both of them. But I'm just going to trim down the negative slightly shorter. Now if you don't have cable cutters, you can use scissors, but use scissors that you don't mind about too much, because you're cutting through some metal. There we go. Alright, that's just going to make it a bit easier and less likely to short circuit. So now we need to strip off the ends. So I just want to cut the plastic and then really pull on the plastic with the scissors. Like that. Twist it around. If you have some proper wire strippers like that, you'll find they just make it much easier. Oops, a bit too keen there. Okay, that'll do us for now. After that, I do usually only ever use reusable cable ties, but I can't find them this small. And this is a permanent fixture. So I do this just as strain relief to strengthen it a little bit. And very conveniently, they've placed some nice holes all over the place, just right for cable tying on. So I think I'll just go past that rubber tube there. Get them nice and tight, so that if it does get pulled, it's not going to pull off the connections there. Alright, that's not bad. I might trim this down a bit, I think. It's quite useful, that thing, but it does not need to be that long. There we go. So I'll also just snip off the end of this. Okay, ready to go. So the next thing we want to do is attach a flail onto one of the blades of the fan, so that as it spins, the flail is going to fly around and hit things like some kind of mechanical drummer. So what I usually use for flails is a thin piece of wire. Don't use the stiffer stuff, these are from a computer. You want something quite thin and flimsy, that's electrical wire. Otherwise, a piece of thin nylon cord with a bit of tape around it works pretty well too. And there's different ways to attach it. Whichever way you choose, it's going to fall off sometimes. You could, if you really know what you're doing, you could use power tools and you could drill a hole through the fan like this. I'm going to clamp it with some pliers because otherwise I'm going to drill into my hand. The simpler and safer way to do it is using a little crocodile clip, and I'm just going to attach the flail onto one of the blades like this, making sure that the flail is pointing outwards so that as it spins round it strikes the objects that we put in its path. Now we're going to want a power supply to make it go, and we're going to use rechargeable 9-volt batteries. Do make sure when you're storing them you keep them somewhere insulated, because if they're just loose in a drawer next to metal objects they could discharge, and they have been known to start fires, especially with high power disposable batteries. Also make sure when you're making your circuit that your connections do not short circuit here. There must always be a gap between your crocodile leads. If these two crocodiles end up touching each other there'll be a short circuit. Your battery will get hot and discharge. A good idea is to use a 9-volt battery holder to keep your connections separated, so make sure there's always a gap. Now we're going to fire it up and see what happens. Just remember, the fan is fussy about polarity, so make sure you get your positive and your negative the right way around. And hopefully we should have instant success. If you don't have instant success, you might have a short circuit here or here. And just to prevent that happening, I'm going to use a little bit of tape, and I'm just going to go over those connections to stop them from touching there. And I'm just going to keep an eye on these two here. Alright, so here we go. Because of what's happening next, I don't want to be always disconnecting this from the wire. I'm going to want to be able to switch it on and off quite easily. And a good way to switch something on and off is with a switch. And you can use anything for a switch that's metal. A switch, remember, is just a break in the circuit. So if I use another lead here, I've got a homemade crocodile lead. I'm just going to interrupt the connection, and now I have a switch in between these two. So that's quite a nice switch. I could use anything metal. The other thing you could use as a switch is a switch, which you can find from dead things if you do some unmaking. So this one here, if I can attach onto that and then onto the other side, and that just means I can very easily turn it on and off. So to finish off, I'm just going to show you some of the kind of things that I like to do with these fans, particularly hitting acoustic objects, especially these beautiful heat sinks that are also from dead computers. You can find lots of different things for free that work well for acoustic objects. Cardboard boxes, plastic cups, tin cans. See what you can find, have an experiment. We're just going to have a look at what we can do, just arranging some objects around the fan and see how that works now. This simple setup here, and also the robot chicken circuit, these are the basis for a lot of the workshops we do in primary and secondary schools and other places. And then we also dip our toes into the mysteries of electromagnetism. This heatsink has been sliced through at an angle to vary the pitch, and some chaotic movement has been introduced by suspending the fan on gardening wire. Using two washers for a switch,
Here the sound is amplified by a contact microphone, the fan is fixed, but the heatsink moves slightly. Another contact microphone here. These are absolutely amazing to use for this kind of thing. They're cheap, or you can find them in Dead Tech. They're very easy to use. The fan is suspended on cotton, and here we've got an egg slicer with the bladey bit having a slight bit of movement. If you're not into those kind of sounds, or you prefer visual stuff, you can make some amazing light wheels just by putting an LED onto one of the blades of the fan. Everything here was free except for the batteries. It's very simple to put this stuff together. You can learn about circuits and acoustics, and depending on your tastes, you might actually come up with something that sounds nice. Or at least interesting.